My name is Elizabeth, and today we are talking about romantic chemistry between characters and how writers can destroy that chemistry so easily by making just a few little mistakes. So, if you want to write romance or include a romantic subplot in your story, but you're not sure if you're doing it correctly or effectively, well, fear not, because I'm going to give you 7 things to look out for that might be sabotaging your romantic chemistry, and you might be doing, and you might not even realize you're doing it. So, number 1, too much touching. What, you might say? Too much touching? Shouldn't it be the opposite? And maybe if you have 2 characters who are supposed to fall in love, it is possible that there isn't enough touching, because it might make them appear more like friends or siblings rather than romantic partners. But that is not what I'm talking about here. What I see way more often from writers trying to develop romantic chemistry between 2 characters is to have the 2 characters touch each other constantly. The problem with that is that all of the tension and the will she or won't she is quickly extinguished when the answer is always yes. She will. Like the first time 2 characters brush elbows has potency and meaning. But if they're constantly holding hands or cuddling, then I feel that can actually run the risk of making them feel more like friends than lovers. Because there is no tension. If the touch is constant and expected, then there is no fun in that for the reader. There is no anticipation and reward. There's no build-up, there's just touching. All the time. Ho-hum. We don't want to read a romance where it feels like the characters have been married for 40 years already. Especially when they've just met and they're supposed to be developing a romance. We need zing and wonder and mystery, and that comes from writing all moments of touch as important moments that hold gravity in the story, and not allowing touch to become just ho-hum everyday expected. Because there's no tension in that, and you need tension. Number 2, the second thing that writers unintentionally do that kills the romantic tension in their story is include time jumps. I've said this before in my other videos about writing romance, but one of the main ways that writers ruin the romantic tension in their story is by including time jumps. Especially poorly timed time jumps, where we don't get to see the main body of the relationship evolve. All those moments of shared glances and building awareness are stolen from us in a time jump. What usually happens is we meet the 2 characters who are going to be falling in love. They meet each other in a scene. Then, for some reason, instead of allowing the relationship to grow and develop on screen, we get a time jump to several weeks in the future. And then we just get a big telling paragraph of what has happened in that jump. Like, Bob and Sarah work together every day at the office, and there's all this animal awareness that's been happening between them, and they've been suppressing it, or maybe they can't stand each other, so they bicker at every opportunity, or are constantly trying to one-up the other person, and instead of seeing any of that happen on the page, we just get told that it happened. And now suddenly here we are about to finally get a scene of it happening. But the problem with this is many, many problems. But the main thing is the writer has now told us what's going to happen in this scene, by recapping what happened in the time jump, and then shows it to us happening in a scene. So then not only is the following scene repetitive, and repeated information is the number 1 way to destroy any type of plot tension in your story, but not only is that scene going to be repetitive, but there's now no room for surprise, because both the characters and the reader are going into the scene knowing what to expect, since we just got told what's been happening for however long was going on in the time jump. It destroys the tension. Whereas if we were allowed to stay in the moment with the characters after the initial meeting, we would get to see all of those interactions firsthand, and it wouldn't have the opportunity to be watered down by time jumps or telling. We wouldn't see the characters in this scene where they already know how it's going to play out between them, since a bunch of stuff has already happened off screen. Basically, what I'm saying is, let us see it happen on screen. Please. That's what makes romantic tension so delicious in fiction. We get to see and experience every glance and elbow bump and hand flex between the characters as it's happening. Don't steal that from us by burdening the story with an unnecessary time jump. Please. Number 3. The 2 romantic leads have more chemistry with a separate character, even if that character is not a romantic interest. Obviously, if they have more chemistry with another romantic interest, then that would be a problem, even if you're writing like a love triangle, because there would still be no tension between them if they have more chemistry with this 3rd character. The reader would still know who they're going to choose right off the bat, because it's obviously going to be the person they have chemistry with. But even if that's not the case, and you're not writing a love triangle, if your character has better chemistry with any other character than their love interest, then that is going to be a problem. It could be their boss, or their best friend, or their niece, But if they have better banter and chemistry with some other character, then every time the reader sees them with that character, then all we'll be able to think about is what could have been with the romantic interest. You know, what we might have had. It cues the reader into the fact that you can write good chemistry, but for some reason, you just failed to write good chemistry between the two romantic leads. Just something to keep in mind. Number 4, the characters in the relationship only experience external conflict. Or another way of putting that is that the tension in the story does not arise from between the two romantic leads, but comes from outside sources. Your characters don't have to constantly be at odds with each other, but if there's no tension and conflict within the relationship, then the reader will not be engaged with the story. At least not as engaged as they will be with the plots that do have tension. What will end up happening, and what I see happening so often in indie romance, is that the characters get together and then there is some exterior plot happening to them, and that overtakes the romance. So all the scenes that have our two leads in them just become recap moments. You know, the two characters just sit and talk about what has been happening in their lives. Probably things that the reader has already seen. And that is boring. The relationship itself needs tension all the way to the end of the story, where that tension is resolved. You don't have to write a slow burn romance, but if you're not writing a slow burn romance, then you do have to come up with other ways to maintain tension within the romantic relationship until the end of the story. You need to remember that the romance either is the plot of your story or is the subplot of your story. But either way, it's a plot, and you need to maintain that thread of tension all the way until the end of the story where the plot is resolved. If all your characters do is come together and recap things and agree with each other, then your readers are going to get bored with their scenes. There is not going to be any romantic tension between them. They will just be telling scenes. And your readers will want you to get back to the main plot, which is just some external thing, something that actually has tension in the story. In order to make the romantic relationship worthy of existing within the story, then you need to make sure it contributes to the rising tension of the story, rather than being a place where the characters only ever feel peace. They can feel peace sometimes, but if that is all they feel, then it's boring. You know, that is probably what you want from a real relationship, but this is fiction. It's a story. And constant peace will make the romantic relationship extraneous and unnecessary for that story. It won't be a plot. Number 5, your characters don't think about each other enough. In order to keep the romantic chemistry high, and part of the story and in your reader's mind, then you need to keep it on the page. And that means that even when your characters aren't together, they need to be thinking about each other. Even if it's in a bad way. Like even if they're so annoyed with the other character, or they can't stand them, or they're straight up bothered by the fact that they're always on their mind, or that they keep popping into their mind for no good reason, or that everything in their life just happens to remind them of them. We need that in the story. Especially if you're writing a romance and not just including a romantic subplot. You need to keep the romance in the reader's mind. And you do that by keeping it in the character's mind, even if they don't want it there. You've got to keep it on the page, so that when the characters are interacting with other people, not their romantic interest, the romantic tension is still alive on the page. Number 6, not enough moments of vulnerability. Whether you're writing an enemies to lovers or slow burn or any other type of romance, one way to ruin moments of potential chemistry is to never allow the characters to be vulnerable with each other. You know, maybe you set up a power imbalance so that one character is naturally more vulnerable than the other, but in order to actually cultivate authentic romantic tension, you have to give moments of vulnerability to both characters. That's how romance is built in life, and we need to see that in the story in order to believe that these two characters are actually in love and are not just in lust or just have friendly banter with each other. If you don't include moments of vulnerability for both characters, then you lose a source of meaningful tension for the story. And yet I see this so often in romance. I think it's especially common if you're trying to write a light romance, or if you want to keep one character all dark and moody and not give them a chance to appear weak to the audience, so you never allow vulnerability. But if you do that, it weakens the overall story, not just the romantic plotline. It steals a level of humanity from your characters that your readers can really identify with. And if you never have moments of vulnerability, then you never get those moments of risk and reward. And that is essential for chemistry and tension, romantic or otherwise. Number 7. Now this is a tricky one, but something that really does destroy romantic tension is having one character hung up on their ex, even if that ex is dead. If your character is always comparing their romantic partner to some other person who isn't even in the story, then why are we, the reader, supposed to root for and swoon over their romance with the character that is actually in the story? You know, there is no reason. It just becomes sad. Obviously, writers do this all the time, and those books can be successful, but I would really caution against it, especially for first-time writers, because it's just a romance killer. Who wants to know that the person you're falling in love with is still in love with their ex and is constantly comparing you to their ex and thinking they'll never be as happy with you as they were with their ex? I just don't like it. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I had to include it in this list. Also, I do offer fiction editing on Fiverr, anything from short stories or single chapters to whole novels. If anybody has a story out there that they'd like for me to look at, please check out the link in the description box below. Thank you.